You've probably met one. You just didn't realize it. Not the loudest person in the room. Not the one posting conspiracy theories on Facebook. Not the guy who never finished high school or the woman ranting in the grocery store parking lot. No, stupid people rarely look the part. Sometimes they're friendly, sometimes they're polite. They might hold advanced degrees, wear tailored clothes, or speak in phrases that sound almost wise. And still, they manage to leave behind confusion, setbacks, and wreckage. Not because they meant to, not even because they had something to gain, but simply because they acted without thinking and without realizing the impact. And here's the worst part. They don't learn. They don't notice. They don't even feel responsible. That's the first clue, and the most terrifying one. Most of us go through life assuming that problems come from malice, greed, power, ideology. We tell ourselves that people are either good or bad, smart or dumb, helpful or harmful. But what if the real danger doesn't come from people who know what they're doing? It comes from people who don't? People who cause damage without intent or benefit. People who throw wrenches into systems they don't understand, then walk away thinking they helped. People who press buttons they've never read the manual for, not out of rebellion or cruelty, but out of something much, much harder to predict: obliviousness. That's what this is about. Not stupidity in the way it's usually tossed around, but not as a punchline or insult. This is about a specific kind of person, one that economist Carlo Cipolla spent years thinking about. A kind of person who creates a special kind of chaos, quiet, untraceable, and relentless. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You'll start noticing it in bureaucracies, in family WhatsApp groups, in boardrooms, in newsrooms, in mobs that burn down what they just cheered, in decision makers who seem to act with the confidence of prophets and the vision of a goldfish. And the real kicker? You're not immune either, because stupidity, as Cipolla defined it, has nothing to do with intelligence. It's not about brain power or education. It's not a lack of talent, not a deficiency in skill. It's a behavioral pattern, a failure of judgment that harms others without any benefit to the person responsible. Think about that. No gain, no motive, just destruction. And yet, they're everywhere. Your coworker who insists on changing something that isn't broken. The volunteer who derails a charity event trying to help. The politician who passes a law with unintended catastrophic consequences and smiles for the camera. Cipolla once said, "Always and inevitably, everyone underestimates the number of stupid people in circulation." It sounds like a joke, but it's not. It's the start of a theory more chilling than anything you'll find in a dystopian novel. Because unlike evil, which you can spot, fear, resist, stupidity doesn't declare itself. It blends in. It pretends to be well-meaning. It wears your uniform, joins your cause, maybe even believes in it, and still, it weakens it. Worse still, it multiplies in groups. It feeds off certainty. It grows stronger when questioned less, and in the age of digital noise, it moves faster than ever before. So we're going to unpack this piece by piece. We'll walk through Cipolla's 5 laws. We'll look at Bonhoeffer, a theologian who argued that stupidity, not evil, was the real engine of authoritarianism. We'll compare notes with Kahneman, Taleb, Arendt. We'll talk about how good intentions lead to disaster, how well-meaning people become liabilities, how the most dangerous actors might not even know they're in the game. This isn't about mocking anyone. It's about defending yourself, because the harm is real, and if you don't know what to look for, you'll be blindsided again and again. This starts with understanding one uncomfortable truth. You don't need to be wrong to be dangerous. You just need to act with confidence and no awareness of the consequences. And that's what we're about to dive into. Carlo Maria Cipolla wasn't some angry blogger venting about dumb people in traffic. He was an economic historian, a sharp one. The kind of guy who didn't waste time on petty insults or throwaway opinions. So when he sat down to write about stupidity, he did it like a scientist, with diagrams, logic, and unsettling precision. The result wasn't meant to entertain. It was meant to explain why some things break down even when no one intends harm. Why human systems, no matter how sophisticated, always seem to attract a certain static. It started as a joke among academics, a tongue-in-cheek essay passed around in university circles. But the more people read it, the less they laughed, because it wasn't really funny. Cipolla was asking a serious question. What if there's a kind of behavior that creates damage for others, brings no benefit to the one causing it, and is completely independent of intelligence, class, or ideology? That question doesn't just live in the realm of theory. It cuts into how you think about your coworkers, your government, your friends, even yourself. Because what he laid out wasn't just an opinion, it was a framework. 5 deceptively simple laws. And once you grasp them, the way you see people changes. Let's start with the baseline. Cipolla didn't define stupidity as a lack of intelligence. He wasn't talking about IQ or education or someone who struggles with math. He was describing behavior, a pattern of actions that consistently produce harm for others without producing any benefit for the actor. Sometimes they even hurt themselves. That's what makes it so eerie. You're not looking at someone trying to be bad. You're looking at someone who genuinely doesn't know what they're doing, but insists on doing it anyway. Picture someone lighting a fire to stay warm in a room full of gasoline. They don't hate you. They don't want to burn the place down. They just don't get it. And they won't listen when you try to explain. That's the kind of person Cipolla is talking about. To clarify his idea, he made a grid. 4 types of people placed on a chart that measured personal gain, or loss, versus the effect on others. It sounds nerdy, but stay with me. It actually explains a lot about how the world functions, or doesn't. In one quadrant, you've got the intelligent person, someone whose actions benefit others and themselves. Think of a skilled nurse, a good teacher, a wise investor. They create positive outcomes across the board. Next to them, the bandit, someone who acts selfishly and benefits at your expense. This person is cunning, maybe ruthless, but not stupid. Think scammers, corrupt officials, lobbyists rigging the rules. They know what they're doing. You can anticipate them. Sometimes you can negotiate with them. Then there's the helpless, people who hurt themselves to help others. Martyrs, people pleasers, self-saboteurs. Kind-hearted maybe, but still destabilizing. They burn out. They enable toxic systems. They suffer while others thrive off their generosity. And then there's the stupid, the one group that makes everything worse, for everyone, including themselves. The genius of Cipolla's theory is that it strips away all the usual excuses. They meant well. They were stressed. They didn't know better. He doesn't care about intent. He looks at results. And that's uncomfortable, because we like to think of people as either good or bad, smart or not. He's saying, forget the labels. Just measure the wake they leave behind. Think of it this way. If someone walks into a room and consistently makes it harder for others to think, build, collaborate, or adapt without getting anything out of it, that's stupidity. And the more influence they have, the more dangerous it becomes. This is why Cipolla's model isn't some armchair rant. It's a diagnostic tool, a way to understand why institutions decay, why reforms backfire, why progress collapses under the weight of its own builders. He wasn't writing for clicks or likes. He was trying to warn people. If you ignore stupidity, real structural stupidity, it will eat your systems alive. And here's what makes it worse. Most stupid people don't act alone. They join boards, run departments, moderate forums, launch startups, not because they're power hungry, but because nobody stops them. Nobody spots them. They don't look like a threat. They might even look helpful. That's why this whole conversation matters. It's not about finger pointing or superiority. It's about realism, about pattern recognition. Because if you keep assuming that bad outcomes only come from bad motives or low IQs, you'll keep being blindsided by damage that no one seems to own. Cipolla's genius was seeing stupidity not as a character flaw, but as a structural force, a blind spot in every human organization, a virus that doesn't care who it infects. And if you don't learn to detect it by behavior, not appearance, you'll fall for it again and again. And the thing is, you probably already have. Here's the first law, the one that sets the tone for all the others. Always and inevitably, everyone underestimates the number of stupid individuals in circulation. That word, always, isn't a throwaway. Cipolla meant it literally. Every person, no matter how skeptical or observant they think they are, will fail to accurately predict just how many stupid people are operating around them. And the scary part? This holds true even after they learn the law. You'd think awareness would sharpen your radar, but that's the thing. Stupidity isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. There's no flashing sign. You only see it in the consequences, and by then, it's usually too late. It's tempting to laugh this off. Sure, there are dumb people out there, but Cipolla's not talking about a handful of flat earthers on Twitter. He's saying, statistically, stupid people are everywhere. Every organization, every industry, every ideology. They're in your family, your company, your movement. And yes, maybe even your mirror on your worst day. Why do we underestimate them? For one, optimism bias. Most people assume a certain baseline of rationality in others, especially those with similar backgrounds. We give the benefit of the doubt. We expect intention to match outcome. But it often doesn't. Then there's social camouflage. A stupid person might talk like everyone else, dress well, have credentials, or mean well. And that's what throws people off. We confuse confidence with competence, good vibes with good judgment, style with substance. Add to that the way institutions filter people. Think about hiring, promotion, elections, groupthink. In most cases, decisions aren't made by evaluating outcomes. They're made based on impressions, networking, reputation, charisma. That's how stupidity creeps in through the front door, welcomed with applause. Here's a real-world example. In 2008, right before the global financial crisis, massive investment firms were creating and selling financial products so complex that even their own employees didn't fully understand the risks. These weren't villains. These weren't dumb people. Many had Ivy League degrees, but somewhere in the system, stupid decisions were being made. Decisions that caused global economic pain without benefiting the individual actors. Banks collapsed. Retirement accounts vanished. And nobody saw it coming because nobody thought stupidity could exist in those rooms. It did. Same thing with social media algorithms. Designed to increase engagement, they ended up boosting outrage, tribalism, and misinformation. Engineers weren't trying to break society. They just didn't think far enough ahead. The outcome? Harm without gain. That's classic stupidity under Cipolla's lens. The same pattern shows up in personal life too. A friend who gives you disastrous advice with total confidence. A coworker who pushes a policy that backfires instantly. A well-meaning parent who repeats a cycle they swore they'd break. It's not just the scale, it's the distribution. Stupidity, according to Cipolla, isn't concentrated in any one demographic. It's not about education level, political alignment, or economic class. It's scattered like landmines. And the fact that you can't predict who's carrying it, that's the danger. You want to believe that people are mostly competent, or at least that they try. But Cipolla's first law smashes that illusion. The stupidity rate doesn't go down with experience. It doesn't vanish with age or training. It's a constant, like background radiation. Now, some people hear this and go nihilistic. Everyone's an idiot. But that's not what he's saying. He's saying, don't confuse your social instincts with accurate perception. Don't assume the room is safe just because it's calm. Don't mistake credentials for clarity. In one way, this is a call to vigilance, but it's also a kind of humility check. You and I, we underestimate stupid people not because we're dumb, but because they don't behave like we expect. They can be agreeable, helpful even, until they're not. Till something breaks and they're at the center of it, blinking in confusion. And the messed up part, you can't argue with them, you can't teach them. That's what makes this worse than ignorance. Ignorance can be fixed. Stupidity is immune to instruction. This is why Cipolla's first law cuts deeper than most people want to admit. It suggests that no matter how sharp you are, no matter how careful or analytical or aware you think you've become, you're still missing some of them. They're still there, floating in the system, and you won't see them until something important gets broken. So, yeah, you're surrounded. Not always in ways that feel threatening, not always in ways you can measure, but if you assume they're not there, you've already made your first mistake. Let's clear up one of the biggest misconceptions right now. Stupid people are not always dumb. That sounds weird, I know. But if you mix up stupidity with low intelligence, you're gonna miss the whole point. And worse, you're gonna get blindsided by people who look smart, sound smart, maybe are smart, and still manage to create messes no one asked for. That's Cipolla's second law. Stupidity is independent of any other personal characteristic. So let's say someone is charming or well-spoken. Maybe they've got a PhD, 3 businesses, and a book deal. Doesn't matter. They can still act in ways that hurt others and themselves with zero awareness, zero benefit, and zero shame. We hate that idea. Our brains are wired to tie competence to packaging. We want the guy with the polished shoes and vocabulary to also be the one who makes good decisions. But that link just doesn't hold up in reality. In fact, some of the most catastrophic decisions in history have come from people with credentials, titles, influence, the whole deal. It's not just that they made a mistake, it's that they made a string of bad decisions, ignored warnings, doubled down, and walked away thinking they did great. That's the Cipolla definition again. Harm for others, no benefit to self. And that's what makes stupidity so tricky. If someone fails a math test or fumbles a sentence, we spot that easily. But stupidity, real stupidity, often hides behind a performance of intelligence. It looks confident, sometimes even visionary. Ever watched a tech CEO launch a product that absolutely no one needs, burn through billions, cause a ripple effect of job losses, and then call it a pivot? That's not evil. It's not incompetence. It's a type of behavioral blindness. They don't see the damage because they don't think they could be the source of it. Now let's flip the script. Think of someone you know who's modest, quiet, maybe even unsure of themselves. They don't use big words, they ask a lot of questions, they second guess a lot. Odds are that person has made fewer stupid decisions than the loud, assertive guy who always has a plan. And that should scare you a little. Because the people we often give the most trust to, the ones with status or confidence, might be the ones most likely to create damage without even noticing. This is where the Dunning-Kruger effect shows up. That's the cognitive bias where people with low ability at something overestimate their competence. But it's not just about skill. It's about judgment. The worst part of being blind is thinking you see everything clearly. Cipolla goes further than Dunning-Kruger. He says, even highly competent people in some areas can still behave stupidly in others. A Nobel Prize-winning physicist might still give terrible parenting advice. A brilliant surgeon might ruin every investment they touch. A respected activist might make choices that damage the cause they claim to protect. It's domain blindness. They think being smart there means being smart everywhere. And once someone believes that, they stop listening. They stop questioning. They stop checking their blind spots. And boom! That's when stupid decisions happen. Not because they lacked intelligence, but because they stopped using it where it mattered. This is why Cipolla said stupidity is independent. It floats outside your resume. It doesn't care how many books you've read or how many conferences you've spoken at. It's measured only by one thing: your ability to recognize when your actions are harming others and yourself, and your willingness to stop. And most people don't stop. They double down. Think about all the industries that collapse under their own hubris, financial bubbles, political movements that eat themselves, startups that implode under hype. Usually there's a point where someone could have pulled the brakes, but they didn't. Because they thought they were too smart to be wrong, and that's the sting. Stupidity is often fueled by intelligence if that intelligence has no humility. Now, it doesn't mean every mistake is stupidity. People mess, smart people mess up. But when the same destructive pattern keeps repeating, and the person in charge keeps acting like the hero, yeah, that's different. That's what Cipolla's talking about. So when someone says, he's too smart to be stupid, they've already missed the point. Being smart doesn't make you safe. Being aware does. Being accountable does. Being open to correction, that's what separates intelligence from stupidity. So yeah, don't be fooled by IQ scores, TED Talks, or fancy job titles. If someone keeps lighting fires and calling it progress, that's not genius. That's something else. This is where it gets real. Cipolla's third law isn't just a theory, and it's a gut punch. A dead serious reminder that not all damage comes from villains. Some of it comes from people who don't want anything, who gain nothing, who leave behind wreckage, not because they're cruel or greedy, but because they have no idea what they're doing, and worse, no idea that they don't. The law says, a stupid person is one who causes losses to another person or group while deriving no gain and even possibly incurring losses. Let that sit for a second. Not malice, not theft, not even selfishness, just destruction that goes nowhere. No payoff, no logic, just a slow-motion train wreck with no destination. Think about that coworker who tries to help by fixing things that aren't broken and ends up breaking everything. Or that friend who gives you loud, confident advice that turns your situation into a disaster. Or someone in power who implements a sweeping policy change that sounds good in a press conference, but falls apart on contact with reality. Now, zoom out. Imagine governments passing laws meant to solve a problem, only to create 3 new ones. Imagine charities that flood a region with donated goods, putting local businesses out of work. Imagine social media platforms optimizing for connection and ending up fueling division and mental health spirals instead. No bad intent, but the damage is massive. And they didn't benefit. In some cases, they got burned too. That's the key. This isn't evil, it's stupidity. And this is also where we bring in Bonhoeffer, the German theologian imprisoned by the Nazis, who saw something most people missed. In one of his prison letters, he wrote something haunting. Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. He wasn't being poetic. He was describing a pattern he'd seen firsthand. Under authoritarian regimes, it wasn't just evil people doing harm. It was ordinary people, nice people, who went along with things they didn't understand, supported causes they couldn't explain, and obeyed rules they didn't question. Not out of hatred, but out of thoughtlessness. He called it a kind of infection, a surrender of reason. He said, "A stupid person will be capable of any evil and incapable of seeing it as evil." And that's what Cipolla's third law is really pointing to. Not stupidity as a joke, but as a kind of blindness. A force that slips past morality and ethics because it doesn't even recognize consequences, it just acts. Without pattern, without reflection, without learning. You can't argue with it, you can't appeal to reason, because reason was never part of the equation. And it gets worse. Because when someone acts maliciously, you can see it, you can trace it, you can understand their motives even if you hate them. But when someone acts stupidly, without intent, without gain, there's nothing to work with. No leverage, no pressure point, no learning curve. They'll do it again, and again, and again, each time thinking they're helping, or at least doing nothing wrong. Let's take a real example. During the early days of the COVID pandemic, there were people, ordinary folks, who spread fake remedies, wild conspiracy theories, and outright misinformation. Not to make money, not to go viral. Some of them genuinely thought they were helping, but they clogged hospital systems, delayed public response, and got people killed. They didn't gain anything, but others paid the price. That's Cipolla's third law, live and unfiltered. Or look at corporate decisions that wreck entire ecosystems, like apps launched without testing, policies enforced without context, or features introduced because it's trendy, only to backfire and drive away users, crash profits, or spark lawsuits. No one benefits, not even the company, but someone pressed go. And here's the part that makes this dangerous at scale. These people often operate with conviction. They're convinced they're right, or at least that they're neutral, that they're just doing their job or trying something new. There's no self-correction mechanism, no feedback loop, no, wait, maybe I'm wrong. Just forward motion into a wall. This is why stupid people, by Cipolla's definition, are so uniquely dangerous. You can't reason with them, you can't bribe them. You can't even scare them off with the threat of failure because they don't recognize failure when it happens. It just passes through them. And yes, they can be charming, friendly, confident. But if their actions produce harm over and over and they never learn, that's what you're looking at. Now here's a brutal truth. You and I have both done this. We've made choices that hurt others and ourselves. We've given advice we weren't qualified to give. We've stepped in where we weren't needed, or stayed quiet when we were. So this isn't just about spotting stupidity in others. It's about recognizing when it's creeping up in your own decisions, when certainty replaces curiosity, when urgency replaces understanding, when you're acting fast and loud and not thinking about the consequences. Because at some point, everyone plays the fool. The key is learning to notice it before you become a recurring hazard to others, or to yourself. Here's the part that stings more than any personal insult ever could. It's not just that stupidity exists, it's that it spreads, and not like a virus. More like a social mood, like a vibe. Like music you didn't pick, but now it's playing everywhere and you're humming along without realizing it. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, locked away in a Nazi prison cell, saw this before most people did. He watched his country fall apart, not just from the top down, but from the bottom up. Good people, quiet people, educated people, joining in, nodding along, saying nothing. He wrote, "Stupidity is not a lack of intelligence, but a moral failing." And the more you think about that, the darker it gets. Because what Bonhoeffer was pointing to wasn't someone who couldn't think. It was someone who refused to. Someone who traded thinking for belonging, who let go of doubt so they could hold on to certainty, even if that certainty was wrapped in barbed wire. He said stupidity was more dangerous than malice. Not because it was louder, but because it was easier to recruit. And you've seen it. Not just in history books. Not just in grainy black and white photos from regimes we all swore we'd never become. You've seen it online, in comment sections, in echo chambers, in groups that start off curious and end up obsessive. People repeating talking points they don't understand, defending ideas they can't explain, attacking strangers like they're avatars in a video game. They're not thinking, they're reacting, and the scariest part? They feel righteous while they do it. Bonhoeffer noticed something chilling about this. Once someone reaches that state, once stupidity becomes social, not just personal, reason doesn't work anymore. Arguments bounce off, facts get swallowed up. Even compassion dies on impact. Because they're not listening, not really. They're waiting to echo. And here's where it links perfectly to Cipolla. Remember, stupid people by definition cause harm without personal gain. So what happens when entire crowds of people are doing that together? Supporting policies that hurt the very communities they live in, spreading fear that locks their own doors, cheering for decisions that eat away at their own freedoms, one bite at a time. They don't benefit, but they believe they're winning. That's the virus Bonhoeffer was describing. And it's not just political, it's not even ideological, it's structural. It happens in cults, in companies, in academic circles, any place where doubt gets punished, any space where questioning the group feels like betrayal, any environment that replaces complexity with slogans. We like to think stupidity is a solo act, someone messing up on their own, but it's not. It's contagious. And when it goes unchecked, it becomes culture. And culture is harder to fight than any single bad idea. Because once stupidity becomes normal, it gets woven into the rules, into policy, into education, into the rituals we follow without asking why. Suddenly, the thing that should have set off alarms just becomes how it's done. This is what Hannah Arendt meant when she wrote about the banality of evil. It wasn't about monsters, it was about office workers filing forms that sent people to their deaths. Clerks, administrators, neighbors, not because they hated anyone, but because they stopped thinking. They let the system think for them, and we're not immune. We think we are, because we've got democracy, tech, education. But those are just tools. They don't immunize you against social stupidity. They might even accelerate it. Look at how fast bad ideas move now. All it takes is one person with a platform, a catchy phrase, and an audience that's too tired or too scared to question. Within hours, millions are echoing something they don't understand. And when it goes wrong, nobody's to blame. Because everybody thought somebody else had thought it through. That's what makes this so dangerous. There's no evil mastermind pulling strings, just inertia. Just people repeating what feels safe, what feels popular, what makes them feel less alone. And once that cycle begins, the harm scales faster than you can trace. A system run by a few stupid people is annoying. A system that turns everyone into a stupid person, even just for a moment, is lethal. So if you're wondering, how did we get here? The answer might not be malice. It might not even be greed. It might just be stupidity, amplified, accelerated, and shared. And the only way out? You've got to pause. You've got to think, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's unpopular, because if you don't, someone else will do the thinking for you. And chances are, they're not thinking either. You ever try to warn someone that something's off, only to get brushed off with, "Oh, come on, they're harmless"? That's where the fourth law lives. Cipolla says, non-stupid people always underestimate the damaging power of stupid individuals. And yeah, he means always. Not sometimes. Not in emotionally charged situations. He's saying this is hardwired, a recurring flaw in how we evaluate risk. We keep mistaking incompetence for innocence. We tell ourselves they didn't mean it. They're just confused. They're trying their best. Or my personal favorite, At least they're not malicious. And meanwhile, stuff breaks, systems fail, people get hurt. And the worst part is nobody sees it coming. Because nobody believes it could be coming from that person. We give them a pass. We assume low threat, and that's the setup. See, with malicious people, you put your guard up. You spot the angle, the greed, the manipulation. But stupid people, real, functional, no-benefit idiots, don't trigger your defenses. They seem like background noise, harmless distractions, until they're not. Think of the person who insists on being part of every meeting but never prepares, the one who slows down every project, pushes bad ideas and can't take feedback, but never actually means to sabotage anything. They just want to help. Or worse, just doing their job. Now multiply that by a few dozen. In one organization, one department, one team. You can't calculate the cost, not directly. But the drag is real. Deadlines get missed, morale drops, good people leave, and the whole thing decays from the inside out. And it's not because anyone was trying to break it, it's because someone didn't understand it, but kept pressing buttons anyway. This is where you start to see the difference between intelligence and awareness. You can have an average IQ and still be a net positive to your group, if you're aware of your limits. But if you lack that, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability in systems that depend on trust is dangerous. Now imagine this on a societal level. Policies that get rushed through because they feel right. Cultural trends that start with emotion but end in chaos. Tech rollouts that solve problems nobody had. And create 5 more in the process. Stupidity isn't always loud. It doesn't always wear a cape or scream at you on cable news. Sometimes it wears a nice smile. Sometimes it quotes statistics. But you'll know it by the pattern. Things keep breaking, and they keep being involved. And yet, they keep getting invited back in. Why? Because we underestimate the damage. We confuse simplicity with safety, and we forget how fragile things actually are. That brings us to Taleb. Nassim Taleb wrote about fragility, how complex systems are vulnerable to small, repeated shocks. Not one big blow, just constant erosion from tiny misjudgments. And stupid people acting randomly but consistently are those shocks. They tap the wrong wire, they misread the signs, they push the wrong lever, and over time, the whole machine starts to shake. There's a reason Cipolla ranked them as more dangerous than criminals. Because criminals calculate risk. They want payoff. Which means you can deal with them. But stupid people? There's nothing to negotiate with. They don't know they're causing harm, they think they're doing fine, so they keep going. And we keep letting them. Because they're nice. Because they're not hurting anyone. Because they're just confused. That's the blind spot. That's the trap. You want to be a kind person. A forgiving person. But if you're not careful, you'll end up defending people who consistently break things. Just because they don't look like a threat. Cipolla's 4th law isn't just about them. It's about you. It's a warning. Don't misread the room. Don't assume quiet equals harmless. Don't assume effort equals competence. Start measuring by impact. If someone keeps leaving messes behind and never learns, never adapts, never changes, stop making excuses for them. Because they don't need intent to do damage. They just need access. This is the law that snaps everything into focus. Cipolla didn't bury the lead. He gave it to you straight. A stupid person is the most dangerous type of person. Not the criminal, not the manipulator, not the power-hungry authoritarian, but the one who keeps causing harm, blindly, repeatedly, and with zero gain. Let that sink in. We're wired to fear predators, people who want something from us, who might lie, cheat, exploit. But those people, the selfish, the malicious, they operate on incentives. You can watch them, predict them, sometimes even bargain with them. There's structure there, however messed up it is. But the truly stupid person, there's nothing to latch onto, no signal, no feedback loop, just chaos in a human body. And chaos, when it has access to tools, platforms, policies, or people, that's what really wrecks things. Think about it like this. Say you're trying to defend a castle. With a criminal, you look at the gate. With a traitor, you check the shadows. But with a stupid person, they're already inside, wandering around, lighting candles near barrels of gunpowder, not out of spite, curiosity. They're the ones who'll press the wrong button in a control room. or forward the wrong email to the wrong list, or say something in a meeting that derails 6 months of planning, and then smile like they helped. The problem is, stupid people don't feel dangerous. They feel familiar, safe. They don't wear the enemy's uniform, they wear yours. And that's why they slip through your filters, again and again. Let's talk about scale. When a malicious person acts alone, the damage is limited by their resources. But a stupid person with influence, or worse, an audience, now you've got problems. A single tweet, a viral video, a policy suggestion that sounds common sense but unravels under any scrutiny. It spreads. People adopt it. Systems adjust to accommodate it. And before you know it, you're running a machine built on bad assumptions, held together with vibes and duct tape. And here's the twist. You might end up helping it along. Because stupid ideas, especially the dangerously stupid ones, often feel simple, intuitive, comforting. It's the complex ones that get questioned. It's the smart solutions that take effort to explain. But when someone says, well, obviously the solution is just insert one-line fix, and it feels right, you stop thinking. And that's how stupid people drag smart people into stupid outcomes. Not by force, but by rhythm. Now imagine this in tech. Someone adds a feature without understanding the ecosystem. It breaks the security layer, exposes user data, causes a ripple that tanks trust. No one meant for it to happen, but here we are, cleaning up after a bright idea no one questioned hard enough. Or in politics. A policy pushed forward without consultation. It hits the headlines, feels good, polls well. But the fine print is garbage. And by the time the consequences show up, the architect is already onto the next shiny thing. They didn't win anything, they didn't learn anything, but they left a crater. This is the tragedy of stupidity at scale. It spreads through confidence, not competence, through repetition, not reasoning. And the damage multiplies not because they're trying harder, but because nobody stops them in time. You want a real-world horror story? Look at Chernobyl. A string of poorly understood procedures executed by people who didn't fully grasp the risks. Some were well-trained, some weren't. But the mistakes stacked. Warnings were ignored. Checklists were skipped. Because someone assumed they understood the system, and nobody questioned it hard enough. And the aftermath? Nuclear fallout. Dead zones. A catastrophe that cost lives, land, and billions, sparked not by sabotage, but stupidity. The most dangerous kind. The kind that doesn't blink when red lights flash. The kind that doesn't even know what it broke. That's why Cipolla put them in their own category. Not just as a warning, but as a fact. Because you can protect yourself against cruelty. You can spot greed. But if you ignore stupidity, it won't just catch you off guard. It'll take everything down with you. So if someone's track record is a trail of broken things, unfinished projects, or damaged people, and they've learned nothing from it, that's not an accident, that's a pattern. And you'd better start treating it like one. You're not going to fix it. Let's just be honest about that first. You're not going to build a perfect system that filters stupidity out. You're not going to teach your way out of it, or vote it away, or automate it into submission. Cipolla never promised a cure. He offered a diagnosis. And once you see it clearly, it was stupidity as a force, as a pattern, as a constant, the goal shifts. It's no longer about fixing stupid people. It's about surviving them, and maybe, if you're careful, avoiding becoming one of them yourself. That starts with clarity. You need to stop judging people by what they intend. Stupid people usually mean well. That's not the metric. You judge by impact. Did this person's actions harm others? Did they gain anything useful from it? Did they recognize the damage when it happened? If the answers are yes, no, and no, you're dealing with stupidity. Now you plan around it. One tactic, pattern mapping. If someone leaves a trail of small disasters behind them, broken workflows, confused teams, lost money, high turnover, and they never connect the dots back to themselves, that's a map. Don't ignore it. Stop asking, but didn't they mean well? Ask, do they learn? If they don't, treat their involvement like a structural risk. Another tactic, incentive audits. Systems that don't reward awareness will eventually reward stupidity. If your organization promotes based on charisma, loyalty, or who speaks loudest in meetings, yeah, you're building a stupidity pipeline. People will rise not because they make good decisions, but because they look decisive. So reverse engineer your incentives. Do they encourage thinking ahead, owning mistakes, shutting up when you don't understand something? If not, you're not defending against stupidity. You're feeding it. You also need a slow down protocol because stupidity thrives in urgency. The faster someone insists you decide, act, fix, react, the more likely they're skipping thinking altogether. Build delays into your life, into your team, into your brain. Default to, let me sit with this, or walk me through what happens next. If the person pitching can't explain second-order consequences, that's a red flag. Stupid decisions sound good when they're rushed. They collapse when stretched out. Also, I don't skip the personal stuff. You're not immune. Nobody is. You're going to have days where you get overconfident, where you ignore details, where you give advice based on vibes and caffeine. Build your own anti-stupidity system. Ask dumb questions before they become real mistakes. Have friends who will say, that's a bad idea, and not sugarcoat it. Make feedback normal, not a crisis. Then there's the containment strategy. Sometimes you can't avoid stupid people. You just have to fence them in. Design systems that limit their range. Put checks in place. Create processes that force second opinions. Don't give them full control. Don't put them in charge of complex, high-impact decisions. Even if they're loyal, even if they've been here forever, loyalty doesn't cancel out incompetence. Tenure doesn't override reality. Now let's get personal again. Watch for creeping stupidity in yourself. You won't always feel it coming. It doesn't announce itself like arrogance or rage. It sneaks in through fatigue, through certainty, through moments when you think, this is obvious, and stop asking questions. One stupid decision doesn't define you, but repeated patterns, that's where the danger starts. So build in reflection, even if it's awkward, even if it slows you down, especially then. Because being right isn't the goal. Staying aware is. That's what separates you from the people who cause damage and never see it. You're willing to pause, to reconsider, to ask, am I the one breaking this and not realizing it? And when you can answer that honestly, you're already doing better than most. So here's the uncomfortable truth. The part you maybe saw coming but didn't want to face head on. It's not just them. It's you. It's me. It's all of us. On a bad day, in the wrong mood, under the wrong light. Cipolla never said stupidity was limited to a specific group. He said it's randomly distributed. That means you can be smart, educated, thoughtful, and still slip into stupid behavior without realizing it. Not because you're evil, not because you're lazy, but because awareness fades, because self-perception lies, because you forget to check the mirror, and once you forget, it starts. You say something too quickly. You give advice you haven't lived. You simplify something that isn't simple. You push a decision that feels right, but you haven't traced the consequences. And when the damage shows up, you justify it because it didn't feel stupid. It felt normal. That's the trap. Most stupid behavior doesn't come from a lack of brain power. It comes from unearned confidence, from skipping reflection, from acting out of habit instead of thought. Bonhoeffer warned about this too. He said stupidity isn't just about ignorance, it's about losing the will to think. And that's when it becomes dangerous. Because now, you're not even open to correction. You've got your conclusion. And you're just defending it. That's how good people become blind spots. How well-meaning choices become harm. And how someone who's not the type ends up doing real damage. So yeah, you've been stupid before. Probably recently, and if that stings, good. It means you're still thinking. The difference between someone who slips into stupidity and someone who lives in it isn't intelligence. It's self-honesty. It's the ability to say, wait, I might be wrong, or that didn't work, let me try again. Or even, I didn't know what I was doing, I'm sorry. You can't outrun the possibility of being stupid, but you can build habits that pull you out of it faster. Curiosity. Asking more questions than you answer. Surrounding yourself with people who'll call you out. Leaving space between thought and action. You won't always catch it in time, but when you do, that's how damage gets minimized. That's how trust gets rebuilt. That's how systems survive. Because stupidity, real consequential system-wrecking stupidity, only thrives in people who refuse to reflect. And the second you start reflecting, you're already breaking the cycle. It's not glamorous. You won't get applause for it, but it's how you stay clear. It's how you avoid becoming a cautionary tale in someone else's Cipolla lecture. So what do you do with all this? You stay awake. You notice patterns. You stop mistaking confidence for competence. In others and in yourself, you build slow systems. You question people who've never questioned themselves. You don't flinch when someone calls something out. You listen. And most of all, you admit you're not exempt. None of us are. Cipolla didn't write his laws so we could laugh at idiots. He wrote them so we could start taking human systems seriously. So we could stop acting surprised when bad things happen for no reason. So we could name the pattern, and then maybe avoid repeating it. You can't fix stupid, but you can reduce its damage. And that starts in the mirror.